Welcome everyone to this month's Ask Nancy. I'm Nancy Berger, communication consultant and executive coach. I have this live stream every month where we talk about, I invite guests to talk about all things leadership, communication, culture building, team building. Today, I'm super excited to have with me Mika Moser, who I just met recently. We were presenting at a conference and I read through Mika. I don't even know if I told you this. I read through your LinkedIn profile. I was like, I really want to know this woman. She knows a lot of stuff. So we had a brief chat, and I really wanted to have Mika on. So today we're talking about how leadership has kind of changed, leadership with heart. But Mika had founded At Sea Level, which I just love the name of your company, where she provides a lot of different services, including executive coaching, consulting, talent consulting specifically. She is a C-suite veteran in her own right, 25 years experience there. But before we get started with our chat, Mika, just if you could tell our audience a little bit about what you do in your words.
Yes. First off, thanks so much, Nancy, for having me on this. This is super exciting. Unfortunately, you've made the mistake that 90% of people make, and that is it's Mika, not Mika.
Oh,
so
wow.
Just want to put that out there in case anybody's looking for me.
First order of leadership, vulnerability, right? Accepting when you make a mistake. Thank you.
No problem. Happy to.
Yeah.
Like I said, 90% of people get it wrong. But yeah, so like you said, I am a former C-suite executive. I have been hiring, managing, and leading teams for over 25 years. My first management job was 24 with a team of 3. Had no idea what I was doing. So have learned very much the hard way, right? But I've been doing that in the space of banking. I've done it for nonprofits and also in the technology space as well. So a couple different various industries. I started at Sea Level about 2 years ago, and it is a talent consulting company really designed to help get more diverse leadership in place. And so we help companies that are looking to advance their next generation of leaders into executive positions. And so we do that a couple of different ways, like you said, executive search. We also do leadership development in group workshops, one-on-one. And then we do some general consulting, looking at your recruiting practices, also doing pipeline audits, just anything really designed to bring up that next generation of talent and get them prepared for the very important role of being an executive and being a leader. So.
Boy, it is really important work. And let me ask you this to start the conversation going. Do you find that in these situations where people are promoted to the next level in their career, do you find that by and large they are prepared for that, or are they prepared to do a good job at what they've been doing? You see,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, they're not prepared, and what happens is exactly what you were saying. Is what happens is we promote people into leadership positions because they've done an amazing job at the job that they were given. And so they're amazing executors. It happened to me as well. The first sort of part of your career, you're a high performer, you're ambitious, you're learning all the tactical pieces of your job, and you're amazing at it. And the next step is for you to be promoted into a leadership position. And so that is a whole different set of skills. And that's not what they really tell you, is that being a leader requires a different muscle that you have to pull on, a different way of communicating, relationship building, all things that maybe did not necessarily have anything to do with the job that you were currently doing, right? And so you get this promotion, you're all excited, you're ready to manage, you're ready to lead, and then you realize you really don't have the skills
to do it
and to do it well. I think a lot of us are kind of making it up on the fly, looking at bad leadership and saying, I don't want to do it that way, but not really having some of those true tactical skills that can be taught and developed on how to do it effectively and how to be a good leader.
I would agree with you. And I'm interested in your take, Mika. When you come at it from that perspective, we're talking about today leading with heart, right? But when you're catapulted into that space, and I think there's a misconception, and I want to know your feeling about it, that you have to show up as like everything,
Mhm.
or present, executive presence, whatever that kind of
Mhm.
nebulous thing means. But that kind of runs counter to this concept of being a vulnerable, high EQ leader who's willing to share setbacks to build its team. So it kind of, the setup isn't all that great.
No, yeah, it isn't, and it's very true. I think everybody kind of has in their head what a leader is and looks like. I mean, there's all kinds of material out there about it, and the people that we're looking up to, from politicians to Fortune 500 companies, Steve Jobs of the world, huge visionary leaders, and we think, oh, I have to be like that. And so we come in and sort of are trying to emulate something without really understanding the skills and the values and how you show up and what that looks like for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in who we are is how we lead. I heard that from Brene Brown. And so understanding sort of what your gifts are, what your strengths are, what your barriers and weaknesses are, what's getting in the way for you, what you value, the value that you bring to the organization are all really important pieces in sort of developing your own leadership style, and that it isn't about emulating somebody else in order to be effective. You really have to sort of look inward to figure out what's going to work best for you, then take the tools and the techniques and layer that on, and then
Right.
bam, you're able to sort of do it more successfully.
Yeah, and like ask for help. Like, I mean, if you need some skill building, do that. But then the basic things like, building trust first, right? First and foremost. How
Yes.
do you do that? Do you do that by micromanaging? No.
No.
Do you do that by withholding all of your setbacks and always having to have the answer? No.
No.
So there's so many things. But okay, so Micah, so tell me right now, like, what are you seeing trending as challenges that leaders are facing right now?
Yeah, there's all kinds of challenges I think that are trending right now. I think um, one is that there is like 5 generations of workers in the workforce right now. And I think a lot of people are sort of struggling with that. So you have the boomers and the Gen Xers who were taught one very specific style of leadership. And then you have the millennials and the Gen Zs in the workforce that are expecting a different kind of leader. And I think a lot of people are sort of struggling with how to navigate the differences in how we work and think and communicate. And so I think that is a big, huge driver of what we're talking about today, which is leading with heart, which is being more empathetic, being more inclusive. And so I think there's a lot of information and conversation right now around inclusive leadership and what that looks like. And it's very different than what I was taught to do to be a leader. I like to say, like, it's less Miranda Priestley, from The Devil Wears Prada, and more Ted Lasso. And so I think some of us are sort of struggling with that transition and really, how to lead with empathy, how to listen, like you said earlier, how to be active listeners, how to build relationships, and what
Yeah.
that looks like.
But let's pause on that because there's so much in what you just said. So I want to unpack it. The first thing that you said that I want to talk about is the generational differences. So, and then that empathy piece, which is this, I want to talk about also. And I know they're interconnected, but I have gotten a lot of questions. I'm sure you have too, like from leaders who have a Gen Z on their team and they just don't know how to communicate with them. So like, I know it's unfair to ask you to do this, but if there were a couple of headlines, like for people listening and watching the replay, like what are some things that might help me lead this younger generation that I'm not feeling like I understand all that well?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I think is listening to them. I think that's what they're looking for, is they want to be heard and they want to be valued. And I always kind of laugh when I figure that that's what they want, is because that's the same thing we all want,
All
is
one.
to be heard and valued. And it's creating a space for them to do that. So in one-on-ones or in team building activities or offsites, whatever that space looks like, giving them a space to be heard. And that means actively listening, leaning into more of a coaching style versus a directing style of leading, and telling them what to do instead of kind of asking them the questions and a lot
Yeah.
of what do you think type of questions to ask. So I think being, like I said, giving them a space to participate is really, I think, helpful
Mhm.
with this next generation. And the second thing I would say is that they just communicate differently. And it's very difficult when you're used to one style of communication or you prefer a certain style of communication to switch that and to change it for somebody else. They
Yes.
just communicate differently. I mean, they're
Yeah.
big on fast communication, they're big on short communication, using texting over email, just little things like that cause so many rifts because we're expecting them to communicate the way that we want to be communicated to. And so figuring out what that looks like together and setting expectations, I think will start to help bridge some of those gaps
Yeah,
between
because
the
I don't think we even like I've heard Gen Zers say, oh well, they, my manager called me on the phone.
right. I'm in trouble. What did
Like
I do?
why are they calling me? And it's so funny to me. It's like you pick up the phone. That is just not,
Yeah.
how they do
Yeah.
it.
Even
So
the way, even the emojis that we use are different. So,
yes.
they just interpret it differently. So, if you think you're a good communicator, I would encourage you to think that you probably need to over communicate and communicate a little bit more, even if you think that you're good at it, because we just all hear and receive information very differently these days.
Very differently. Now, would you say this is more a Gen Z thing or it's Gen Z and millennial, or how do you kind of?
It's kind of hard to break it down, and I don't love stereotyping the
I know,
groups
I
because
agree.
there's amazing and smart, intelligent workers in all the groups, and I hate pigeonholing them. But I think honestly, it's any generation understanding how they want to communicate, taking the time to understand how they best communicate, how they best receive information, and then
Mhm.
and tailoring your messaging in that
And you
way.
can get so much information by just asking the question.
I know, right?
Like, how do you like to communicate? It goes back to your point of creating a coaching culture, which lives in the space of asking questions
right.
and listening to
And
the
listening.
answers.
Mhm.
Simple, not
And
easy.
also to that too is creating a consistent space to do that. I think a
Yeah.
lot of leaders are so busy putting out fires and running from one decision to the next or one meeting to the next that there isn't really a space for their team to spend any time with them, to get
Yeah.
to know them and to be heard. And so it could be as simple, if you're not already doing this, is I mean, are you doing one-on-ones with all of your team members? Are you creating some routinely consistent meetings that you always show up for
Yep.
and creating a time and a space for them to share with you what's going on with them, for you to ask sort of what is it that you want to do next? How can I be a support to you? Creating that space for them to build that relationship with you, and discuss communication challenges and styles. I just don't think we are doing a very good job of creating that space so that they
Yeah.
can come to us and we can work through and puzzle through some of those challenges.
Yeah, I agree with you. That a weekly one-on-one, it's just on the calendar and you just have it with your. Now, do you think that, in your opinion, are leaders getting a little kind of squidgy about this because they feel like if they create that space, it's just going to become too familiar and it's
Mm,
not work-like enough? I don't
mm.
know. Do you
I
think?
haven't heard that. I have heard I don't have time and I want to create an open door environment where they can come whenever, because it's like if it's too rigid and too structured, it doesn't feel like I am being open to the
Mm,
conversation. And what I say is absolutely, you're more than welcome to have an open door policy. It's not that you're saying I'm not here for you ever. It's just this space is for them, and this
yes.
space is for them to ask questions, for you to get more insight into them and what's going on with them. I mean, let's just like life gets in the way. When do you talk about life getting in your way?
Yeah, an open door policy is it's charged.
Yes.
It's not what it seems, because when a leader says, "Oh, I have an open door policy," and it's in lieu of booking that weekly one-on-one, when somebody just breezes in the office, the leader may not be in the have the bandwidth or be in the brain space for that conversation. And then what happens is they're not actively listening, they're not
Mhm.
present, and then that reinforces to to the person that they're not present. So it could
Right.
backfire badly.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
would agree with you. And it
Yeah.
also doesn't do you as a leader a whole lot of service if you're constantly being, um, having people coming in and out of your office. It's very difficult for you to get what you need to get done.
To get done.
So I think,
Yeah.
yeah, we confuse open door with being available
Yeah.
versus what we're saying is, I'm trying to create a space for you to be heard, for you to share what's going on with you, and for me to give you insights and perspectives that you need to do a better job. And I'm going to consistently give you that time on my schedule to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. So let's pivot over to the empathy piece, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about this. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how leaders approach it, navigate it, and how they kind of what they believe it means.
Yeah. I will say that, interestingly, I think some of us are struggling with what empathy means. And I think we're confusing being empathetic with not holding people accountable.
Mm,
And I think that's empathy is about, listening and putting yourself in that person's shoes and understanding where they're coming from.
yeah.
And then what happens is we listen to, what's going on, or, where they're coming from. And then we don't finish out the exercise and hold them accountable and set expectations for what we need them to do. So
Mhm.
empathy is very different than empowerment and accountability. And I think they
Yes.
start getting blended a little bit, especially when you've got, a team member that is struggling or is not performing at the levels that we want them to.
Right. So let's consider an example. You have a team member who is going through a personal challenge. Maybe it's something with their family, or they're caregiving for an elderly parent, or they're going through a divorce, or whatever. There's a million things it could be. And they come to you and they say, I'm going through this thing, my performance has been off, whatever it is. Being empathetic as a leader, in my mind, is feeling that person's pain, understanding that this is very difficult, and listening, as you said, and being really present, and how can we support you?
Mm-hmm.
And then that person also has to take responsibility for their own journey on that. And if they continue to, like, say, for instance, HR refers them to a counselor that can help them go through, and then they're still not performing after 3 more months, then that's a time when what can we do differently here, because this isn't working. Doesn't
Right.
mean you don't care about them.
Correct. Right. Right. Exactly. And I think that's where we're stopping short. And I'll also say is, listening and understanding, like, yes, that is a very difficult situation, and that you understand how challenging that is for them. But there's still an expectation of work that has to happen. Like, I still need you to finish out this project by this date. So then an empathetic leader is like, so now what do you need in order to do that? Do you need a
Right.
flexible schedule? Do
Right.
you need, do you need me to coach you through it? Do you need, a different, skill, or that somebody else to join the team? Whatever it is,
Right.
we need to have that conversation so that we can still meet this deadline. And I
Right.
think
And
that's
it's
what
not
happens.
taking the project away. It's not saying,
Exactly.
I'll do this, or I'll find somebody else to do it, because then you're disempowering the
Right.
employee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. You're
So,
saying, I hear you. What support can I offer to help you still make that deadline? And then
yeah.
and then it turns into a dialogue and a conversation. And then it's listening to that conversation and then having them help you come up with a solution as well.
And then when you do that, when they help you come up with the solution, and together you empower that employee, your messaging to them is, I know you can do that. I know you can see your way through this. We're here to support you. You still are accountable for it. We understand that you're going through a challenge. Like, that's all really powerful and
Yes.
enriching, as
Yeah.
opposed to, and I don't know where the misunderstanding comes, where leaders think if they hold somebody accountable, they're not being empathetic. They're very different things.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's just one of those, it's a tough conversation. You're afraid that you're going to hurt their feelings or they're going to get upset. And I think it all comes kind of back down to, it's just one of those tough conversations that leaders have to have. And, if you're not equipped for that or uncomfortable doing it, that makes the conversation much harder. So.
Yes, yes. Tell me, can you give us like a case, like a case, an interesting case study of maybe one of your clients who struggled with this and how you helped, how they navigated it to do it differently? I don't mean to put you on the spot,
Yes,
but
okay.
it's such an interesting struggle, and
Yeah,
it's kind of nuanced.
it
So,
is. It is. I can give one example that is that I actually experienced personally. I actually had an employee who was having a tough time coming to work on time. And we were a very flexible work environment. Like we were not like we didn't need everybody to clock in at a certain time, but
mhm.
we started the day between 7 and 9 a.m. And this was pre-COVID, so this is when everybody still kind of came in at the same time every day. And he was just struggling to come in, and I mean not like 20 minutes but like 45, 60, sometimes 90 minutes late,
Ooh,
and not like one time a week, like a couple of times a week. So um it was brought to my attention that this particular team member was struggling to come in on time, and it was starting to have a little bit of a cultural effect.
mhm.
And so I did one-on-ones with this employee. So it was in our regular one-on-ones. And I said, hey, I just want to ask you, is something going on with you? And he was kind of standoffish, like, no, I'm fine. And I'm like, okay, well, something seems off because you're not coming in on time. And it's consistently being late. And so I feel like something's going on, and I just wanted to, just explore that with you. And we had a good enough relationship that it just took me asking one more time for him to sort of open up. And what he was sharing with me was that he was having a hard time getting out of bed, and he was going through a personal challenge. And so my old school leadership kind of kicked in and was like, okay, well, get it together. And I need you to like come in. I'm going to write you up. And if you don't, you're going to, be, could potentially be let go. That was kind of what I was taught to do, like write them up and put them on a PIP and be done with them. But empathetic leadership was more like, okay, I understand that that's challenging, and that you're having a hard time. And so I'm going to connect you with HR so we can get you some resources, but we still need you to come in on time. And so what do we need to do? I said, I will support you as long as you're supporting and helping yourself. I will give you a little bit of leniency here, but what do we need to do to help you be able to still get here on time? And interesting enough, his whole kind of demeanor changed just in that conversation. He no longer was feeling sort of shame and guilt. He now realized, okay, she understands that I'm struggling. We came up with a texting system, like if he was struggling, that he needed to text me, so I at least know it was a struggling day. We kind of came up with a system between the two of us on how he was going to help navigate that. And he started getting some help, and he started improving. So that is sort of how to thread the needle a little bit today. Whereas, like I said, the way that I was sort of taught was,
Oh,
put him
yeah.
on a PIP, and he's not a good employee. And he really was a good employee. He just was going through a personal
See,
challenge.
that's the thing right there. And you could not have shared a better story. Really highlights exactly what we're talking about here. So the old style leadership, had you resorted to that, and if leaders resort to that now, you are sending a message to that person that they're a bad employee because they're having a personal
Mhm.
challenge. That is
Yeah, and that's
right.
not the message.
And that's
Absolutely.
an inhuman message
Correct.
anyway. So what you did was you said to him, you are not your challenge. Your challenge is here, and
Yeah.
it's part of you, and you
Yeah.
empower it. So this, as you said, the shame goes away, and then things can, and you would have lost a really good employee if
Yeah.
it had been that.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like it was having an impact. It was having impact on the culture because his other team members are showing up on time, and so
Yeah.
it does have a real ripple effect if you're not able to address it, because other people were starting to feel like, well, I can come in late too, and I don't have to follow the
Well,
rules. And
yeah,
so,
but
but
Micah,
but my
on the flip side of that, what you did also had a ripple effect on culture
Exactly. That's my point. Exactly. Yeah. So by
because you,
addressing it and
yeah.
helping him shows, okay, they're listening, they're caring about us. We're all human beings. We're all trying to do the best that we can here today. We're all working toward a common goal. How do we support each other in the best way possible? And it showed like we're all here to support each other. And he's just going through a circumstance but he's still being held accountable, and he still needed to show up and be a team member.
Right. So empathy is feeling for a person, understanding their experience. Accountability is not, they're not mutually exclusive. Accountability is, so hear that, audience? Okay, everybody will hear. Okay, that's a really great, because I think it is a widespread issue. And don't you find, I know I do, that these nuanced things, people get like uncomfortable around, they're not quite sure how to do it, like inclusivity, diversity of thought means so much, it means so many things. And to address it takes, you have to be thoughtful and careful, and that's why these discussions are so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, leadership is not easy. I mean, it's not easy. And so it does take thought and intentionality. It does take a lot of vulnerability. It does take a lot of courage. And I think people get a little nervous especially when you're having a person that's a little bit challenging for you. We want to just kind of shy away from it and hope it'll sort itself out. But I have found you got to lead with courage, and you got to get in there and have some of the tough conversations. But if you're doing it with empathy, and if you've built a relationship with that person, it's not as challenging to have, because we're just coming together as two human beings, and I'm here to help you be the best that you can be. And when you kind of approach it in that way, everybody sort of calms down and realizes we're all in the same team here.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's a practice. The practice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what a great discussion. We could talk for an hour about this very thing. I want to make sure that everybody knows, Mika, how to get in touch with you and in touch with that C-Level, and how people can work with you. So
yeah, absolutely. Love to connect on LinkedIn. It's one of my favorite ways to build out my network and get to connect with people. So you can find me on LinkedIn with my name, Mika Moser. It's pretty easy to find. There's not that many of me out there.
Not that many of them.
But find me on LinkedIn and send a connection request, and we'll definitely link up. If you want to learn more about the work that we're doing and how to get plugged into that, if you have a rising leader that needs help getting prepared for an executive position, you can find us at C-Level, which is at atclevel.com. So at clevel.com. And you can always email me as well, which is mmoser@clevel.com. So would love to connect with anybody. Would love to answer any questions or to brainstorm with you. Please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, and anybody watching the replay, you can always reach out to me if you want to get in touch with Mika and you either forgot or didn't, whatever. You're on the Peloton and you're like, I can't remember what she said, and I want to get Nancy at nancyrburger.com is where to find me. You can email me through there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. But for today's up and coming leaders, if you're feeling like you kind of want to prepare yourselves a little bit more, understand what's required of you, and kind of like transition into that role with confidence, I think Mika and at C-Level can really help you. So please reach out to her. This has been such a great discussion. We didn't get any advanced questions for this, but if we get any on the flip side afterwards, I will reach out, and maybe we'll have to do this again, Mika. We'll
Sounds good. I'm here for it. This was great. Thanks again so much, Nancy, for letting me join.
It was really, really a pleasure. So this was Ask Nancy, my monthly live stream with Mika Moser, and I will see you all at the end of June. Gosh, I can't believe half the year is almost over for the next one. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.